Awesome. Alrighty, so where we're diving in today is on page 44, and we're kicking off the chapter, We Agnostics. And what's really exciting about this is going to bring us into step two. And we'll see this a lot more predominantly as we get into the later chapters. But I always like to explain the context, which is the title. And so Emily, she got page 44 in the chat. We saw that. Sorry, I shouldn't be pointing out the things that you're doing as you're doing it, because that's drawing unnecessary attention. Nobody all look at her all at once. Sorry, that's not a good way to start a big book study. Just lightly teasing. You're doing great. But the chapter is We Agnostics. But I want to point something out. It's not the chapter to the agnostic. It's good because we'd make that joke, two agnostics, like we do with two wives, like two wives. You'll notice we don't make that joke with two employers, two employed. We don't make that one, but it's not to the employer or to the agnostic afterward. For agnostics, it is entitled We Agnostics. And I think there's two reasons it's entitled We Agnostics. So the first is it's coming from that place of empathy and understanding. And man, if you've been coming to the study and then rocking and rolling with us, you know that this is a book that meets us where we're at. It does not expect perfection, but it's going to meet me where I'm at in my resistance, in my denial, in my andas, in my yeah buts, in the I'm different, and it is going to take me where I need to go. And it's saying we agnostics. But I also believe part of the reason it is saying we agnostic is because when we all come to the rooms at 12 step, we all of us have some level of agnosticism. Now, bear with me with that because it's like, girl, we just started the big book study and you calling me out? Girl, please. So before I do that, I got to explain, what does agnosticism mean? What does it mean to be agnostic? Because in 2025, we hear the word agnostic and it sort of refers to somebody that is a little like, maybe there is a higher power, maybe there isn't, kind of sitting on the fence, maybe, maybe not. That's the sort of modern belief of what it means to be agnostic. And it's interesting because the word atheism would refer to somebody that has faith that there is no power, faith that there is no God, which is an interesting thing because in our modern language, it actually requires more faith to be an atheist than an agnostic. But because I am fun, and I'm so sorry to those who are coming to this big book study for the first time, you're like, what did I get myself into? Because we're going on an etymology tangent. Woo! Pew, 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 pew. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Etymology, not entomology. That's the study of bugs. But etymology is the study of the origin of words and the history of words. And so when we look at agnostic, the word agnostic is Greek in its origin. And when we break down the word egg and gnostic, egg in Greek means without, and gnostic as in gnosis means knowing. So it is we without knowing. But I'm going to point something out, and not that you lovely, lovely people at this big book study would ever do this, but the knowing that we're talking about is not that knowing, when your sponsor's giving you a spiritual suggestion and you're like deflecting, not you guys would never. And you go like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. That's not the knowing that we're talking about. We're not talking about the intellectual head level knowing. We're talking about that heart level gnosis, that heart level knowing. And if you see the word gnosis used in reference to certain pieces of literature, certain texts, it is talking about a heart level knowing. So what it's saying is that all of us, when we come to the rooms of 12 step, regardless of our maybe religious beliefs or religious training or religious background, we all are experiencing some level of that lack of heart level experiential knowing. Now, bear with me with this. When we get to step 11, we're going to look at how we seek to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand him. And the word conscious, it's, again, I promised an etymology tangent. Signed, sealed, delivered. You're getting it. Etymology. Woo. The word conscious is Latin in origin. And con means with. And the shus, which is broken down to sire, means knowing. And so at step 2, and that's where we're at today, we don't have that heart level experience knowing of this power. But by the time we get to step 11, we will be improving and building upon that heart level with knowing of this power. And that is the purpose of the 12 steps, to take me from that I do not have an experience to build within me this experience. Now, there's this famous BBC interview, and if you guys remember when we were in There Is a Solution and talking about the AA history, we spoke about how Dr. Carl Jung gave us the information of what our solution is. And the solution that we have is a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, an entire psychic change. Now, there's this famous BBC interview with Dr. Carl Jung. And they ask him, and you can look it up on YouTube, and I have a feeling that's what Rob's trying to do right now. Unless it's not, in which case I didn't mean to accidentally throw him under the bus. He's like, girl, I'm just trying to check the hockey scores. How we doing? Go team, sports. And I will tell you his level of dedication, because he shows up here when there is hockey on. So, I mean, he's a real trusted servant, let me tell you. But there's this famous BBC interview, and in it, they ask him, growing up, did you believe in God? And he said, yeah, growing up, I believed in God. And then they said, do you believe in God now? And he says, no. And there's a pause. He says, I've got no need for belief. And there's a pause. And then he says, I know. And that's what we're after. We're going to start at step 2 with this idea that maybe there could be a power. But as the result of these 12 steps, we will go from without knowing to that with knowing experience of that power. So there is no need for belief. We know. That's what we're after. But we're all going to come to step 2 without having that experience. And so as we dive in, because, I'm the sort of person that'll talk for like 20 minutes on just the title. So as we dive into the very first paragraph of page 44, those that just joined us, I promise you didn't miss anything. Glad you're here. So in the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. Goodness gracious, I hope so. I hope we learned something in those preceding chapters. We're on chapter 4, and there was a whole doctor's opinion, which, would add to that. And then we had some info in the preface and the forewords. Like, I hope we learned something of alcoholism. And it says, we hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And this is the distinction. And man, if you're working with somebody who is new and is coming to whatever fellowship that you are a part of, and they don't know if they have the illness that is outlined in this book, or we're here today and we're not sure whether we have the illness that is laid out in this book, this is where we can go. And man, I love these two statements that I get to turn into questions, and I get to hold them up to the light of my own experience. Because I talk about this quite a bit. When I came into the rooms, I showed up with a whole lot of andas. So when I went to AA for the first time, it was like, I'm an alcoholic, and I had buckets of andas, and I have a drug problem, and I'm mentally ill, and this, and that, and some of you are like, we are not surprised with any of the information which you have divulged. In fact, so much is coming into place. And then I would show up with all these yeah buts, right? Yeah, but I'm young. Yeah, but my ex was worse than me. Yeah, but this. Yeah, but that. And some of you guys have heard this a lot. When I would come to the rooms, I would hear people share, and I would do this thing where I would judge. not you guys at this big book study. You guys would never be judgmental of somebody talking, right? But I would be silly little jerk over here, and I would listen to some jerk like me natter on, and I think, whoa, I'm not as bad as Paige. Whoa, this thing couldn't possibly help me. And then some lovely gentleman like Rob would start talking, and I'm like, wow, I'm way worse than that guy. He's got his life together. And I was looking for all the ways that I didn't fit, and all the ways I didn't belong, and all the ways that I wasn't like you, and at the same time, desperately wanting to be a part of. That dichotomy of I don't want to be like you, but I need to be accepted by you. And it was these two statements that I was able to turn into questions. Man, they pegged me between the eyes. And I could not deny who I was, what I was, and I was able to see the truth. And this is it. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. Or, and I'm going to be real honest with you, I am an and sort of lady. I am not an oring it around, but I am and. But it says or. Or, if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take. And so it says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, you can make a little note in your book to write if you want. If you want, nobody's going to make you write in your book, but I do hear it's what the cool kids are doing. I know I've been doing that for a long time, and I'm like, this maybe is some problematic behavior that I'm demonstrating, but I do hear all the cool kids write in the book, unless you're driving, in which case the cool kids drive safely. All right, but you can make a little note that is the mental obsession. We can ask ourselves, when I honestly wanted to quit, when I honestly said, okay, I don't want to do this again. And that honestly can honestly be when we're at the spiritual prayer position at 3 a.m. praying to the porcelain gods, make it stop. You guys know, some of you know. Yeah, I had no problem with the higher power then, right? But when I have said, I do not want to do it again, I don't want to drink again, or I don't want to use again, or I don't want to gamble again, or I don't want to text my ex again, or I don't want to act out in that compulsive way again. And I have said, I don't want to do it again. Has it had any effect? And I'll be honest with you guys. If we're hanging out on a Monday night, Tuesday morning, love you, Scott, probably not. Probably not. Probably your best efforts to stay sober have not worked. Because if you're real quiet, we can hear the bottom of the barrel being scraped, and here I am doing the big book study. I'm joking. But the truth is, have I tried to stay happy and sober at the same time, and has that not worked? Have I said I don't want to do it again, only to find myself drinking again, or using again, or doing whatever brings you to this study again and again and again? And then it says, or. I'll be honest with you guys, again, I'm an and. But it says, or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take. Now let's have a look. What happens once I start? It is my experience that I cannot control it every single time. And if you're writing in your book, which I have it on opinion, that's what the cool kids are doing, you can make a little note that is the physical allergy. And that is how we diagnose this illness. It is just that simple. It's not based on how many DUIs I have. It's not based on, how low the bottom was, how awful the consequences. What happens once I start? Do I set off this thing inside of me that says I need more? And the more that I do, the more I need to do. And does that set off? And I'll be honest, more often than not, because a lot of people will do this thing where we hear that and we think back to back in 86, I had 3 drinks like a lady. I was born in 88. But back in 02, back in 04, back in 2010, this one time I drank and my pants were dry the whole time, which apparently that's what successful drinking is. Haven't approached that, but I'm remembering the exception, not the rule. And it's my experience that once I start, I really don't know what's going to happen. And I really don't know if I'm going to be able to stop. And I drink or use or whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study, into consequences, into pain, into suffering, into doing things I did not want to do? Do I know what it's like to start and not be able to stop once I've started? And if that is me, that is the physical allergy. And what that means is that I can't ever do it again. So for me, as an alcoholic, as an addict, I cannot ever, ever safely drink or use ever again. But here's that thing. The first question that have I lost the ability to choose? I go back to it again and again and again. The obsession of the mind. That is what makes this a hopeless condition. That is my step one. That idea that I can never, ever, ever safely drink again, and I will. That is my step one. And man, when I got those two things together, those two symptoms, only two, when I got those two symptoms, man, I am in a hopeless condition because I cannot drink and I cannot use drugs, but I cannot stay sober. And I'm stuck. And that is how we diagnose this illness. And it allows me to lay aside my old ideas, lay aside my preconceived notions, lay aside my andas, lay aside my yeah buts, lay aside all that aside and see the truth. Once I start, I cannot stop. And when I have not wanted to do it again, I do it again. And that's me. And it says, we didn't even finish the sentence because that's how I roll. It says, you are probably an alcoholic. So if I have these two symptoms, and again, it says or not and, I probably have this illness. And it says, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And I'll point something out. I don't know if I spoke about this at this study, but I heard it when I was at Rach's study. Shout out to Rach on Fridays. Team Big Book Compendium. Nobody does that. That's only me, just making a little chant. Go team. I don't know how I like this. But what is you'll notice that when I talk about this, I talk about an illness and I don't use the term disease. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is I saw some people arguing about that and I'm like, oh, I am going to avoid any of that. But I heard an interesting definition, the difference between an illness and a disease. Now, at this point in history, when the book was published into the world, alcoholism had not been formalized as a disease by the American Medical or the American Psychiatric Association. It was a lot of work actually by Marty Mann, our homegirl, who I just make friends with all the co-founders. I think we're besties. They probably wouldn't have liked me, but I just imagine that I'm like, Marty, my girl, what's up? How we hanging? So it wasn't diagnosed as a disease. But I heard the difference between a disease and an illness. And a disease is a diagnosis that is given to you by a medical provider. But an illness is a report of my symptoms. So when I'm talking about oh, thank you, that's very kind. When I'm talking about my symptoms as an alcoholic, as an addict, it is an illness. And even though this is pedantic, and I'll be honest, I don't correct anyone ever about this at all. Like, you call it whatever you want, girl. I'm not correcting you at all. But what I find is interesting about that is who here has been told for years, you have a problem, you're an alcoholic, you're an addict, how you engage with whatever brings you to this study is abnormal. And man, I could not hear it. I'm the one that needs to be convinced. I'm the one that needs to see clearly what my symptoms are, because I'm the one that needs to be convinced of my illness. And so that is where I'm pedantic with purpose. And I actually have that on a t-shirt that a friend of mine got me, because I say things like that. Just so fun at parties. Alrighty. So what I'll emphasize is the illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So that's, like, we spoke for time and time again about the cycle. I can't stay sober. but I need to stay sober. And if I'm stuck in that, I'm stuck in the cycle. And the only way that people like us have found to get out of that cycle is a spiritual awakening. And that is the solution that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Drug Addicts Anonymous, and whatever 12-step fellowship you are a part of. Our solution is a spiritual awakening. And at step 2, all I am asked to believe is, could a spiritual awakening be possible? Could it be possible? I'm not expected to have that with knowing, conscious knowing, but could it be possible? Is it possible that Rob is here not watching the hockey because of the power of a spiritual awakening? Even if the Leafs are playing, I don't know if they're playing. I didn't look it up. Go Sports. Or whether or not they're playing the Panthers. I see what's up. Yeah, go Sports. I am so fun at parties. I don't have to know it. I don't have to know what it looks like. I don't have to understand it. I just need to believe that somebody like Rob has had one and that they exist. That's it. And that's where we're starting at step 2. And Rob put in a little definition of malady, which I always like to, like, in my head when we talk about the spiritual malady, and we will as we go through this chapter, We Agnostics, we're going to do a deep dive into the spiritual malady. But when I read it on a piece of paper, I almost always want to go spiritual malady, which is not how that is read. Don't go up to people like, why today I am quite positively bedeviled with my spiritual malady. That is not how we make friends. And you guys don't need tips on making friends because you're a bunch of the cool kids and I love you the most. All right. So what we're seeing is in We Agnostics, the book again is coming and meeting us where we're at. It says, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. So if you're here and you're like, man, I'm an atheist or I'm an agnostic or I have God issues or issues with some sort of higher power, it's saying, yeah, we hear you. That this experience seems impossible, this experience that we need to have if we are going to survive. And it says, but to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. And how do I know if I am an alcoholic of the hopeless variety? I didn't know we come in flavors. I thought I was just going to be like strawberry. Actually, let's be real. I would be like the one flavor of popsicle that nobody likes, and so it's left at the end. Which I won't say what flavor of popsicle or Starburst that is, because we have no opinion on which the best popsicle or Starburst flavor is. This is a weirder start to this big book study than it normally is. I'm just going to pause and acknowledge that it's a bit weirder than normal. But it's that idea that, like, what is it to be the hopeless variety? Yeah, no opinion on outside issues. Yeah, we have no opinion on lemon starbursts or pink starbursts. But what is it to be the hopeless variety? To be the hopeless variety is somebody who is the allergy of the body, coupled with the obsession of the mind. That is what it means to be an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. Doesn't matter if you're young, doesn't matter if you're a lady, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter your family, your job, your career, doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank, doesn't matter consequences, crimes, any of that. Do I have the allergy and the obsession? If that is me, I am of the hopeless variety, which is unfortunate because I was hoping I'd be in a different flavor palette, but hopeless we are already. And it says to be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis. And basis, we can make a note that that is a way of life. Basis as in basis of life are not always easy alternatives to face. And this is a callback to the bottom of page 25, where it talks about, I got 2 options. Go on to the bitter ends, blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation as best I could, or accept spiritual help. If I have this illness, I got 2 options. Oh, crushing it with the page numbers, Emily. Genuinely crushing it. Sorry, and then I feel bad because I don't give Rob this much praise. Rob, you're doing wonderful. He's like, please stop. Uh, but two options. I've got two options and only two options. If I do not have the illness that is laid out in this book, girl, I got choices. And I can do other things. I can just go to meetings. I can do some of this work. I can go to therapy. I can go to the gym. I have a sponsor that takes umbrage every single time I say that. He's like, hey, you're so anti-gym. I'm not anti-gym. Go to the gym. Go get outside help. Some of these things that I'm mentioning are so useful and helpful and important. And like, do those things. But what I'm saying is that they are not a solution for somebody like me. I got two options, and I got only two. Go on to the bitter ends, blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation, or accept spiritual help, or in this case, be doomed in alcoholic death, or live on a spiritual basis, as in way of life. These 12 steps are a way of life. And here's the thing, the book, again, meeting us where we're at. It's like, yeah, that's not an easy alternative to face. That's not a pleasant option. But I'm reminded that if I do not choose, I have made a choice. So if I do not actively and intentionally choose to live on a spiritual basis of life, to live these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it because it does, what that means is I have chosen to be doomed in alcoholic death. Whether I think so or not, whether I like it or not, whether I believe it or not, if I do not actively and intentionally choose to do this thing, I have chosen the alternative. And to not choose is to choose. And I was genuinely hoping that I came here with like baby alcoholism, and I could do like AA or 12-step light. You know what I mean? I could do the diet version. We don't got no Splenda up in this thing. We don't got a diet option. I will say the 12 steps are gluten-free though. If you've got any intolerances, they're gluten-free, lactose free. It's all good. 12 steps. You're good for that. And it says, but it isn't so difficult. So again, the book meeting us where we're at and is going to take us where we need to go. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. And I want to point something out. We're referencing the first 100 members, more like 80. But oftentimes we think, oh, that's spirituality. It's an outdated thing. And so many people struggle with the whole God idea, the spiritual concept. Like it's you don't understand. Well, in 1939, from 1935 to 1939, half of the original members, so about 40 to 50, 50s being generous, struggled with the spiritual angle. This is not a new problem. And what's good about that is that means the problem can be easily overcome. And we're going to see the bar to this thing is far lower. Some of you guys know I like to make the joke. It's wheelchair accessible because they let me in. Ta-da! It's gotta be ADA compliant. That bar is so low. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. All right, that is a very specific page joke. And if you don't get why that's funny, just stick around. You'll get it soon. All right. So it says about half our original fellowship were exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. Anyone here have that experience? I'm hoping I'm not as bad as you. I'm hoping I got the diet, illness, addiction, alcoholism, diet, codependency, diet, whatever brings you to this study. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit of an issue. And I was hoping I wasn't as bad as you. But after a while, we had to face the fact we must find a spiritual basis of life. Basis as in way of life. And I want to emphasize we must. You ever hear in whatever fellowship you're a part of, there's no musts? It's looking a little musty. Ooh, she musty. We got some musts, right? And I will say there are no musts to be a part of. The requirement for membership of whatever your fellowship is a problem with that substance or behavior and a desire to be a member. The third tradition requires nothing more than that. And that is the bar for entry to any 12-step fellowship that you might be a part of. But what I have found is the requirements for sobriety are a little bit higher, right? A little bit higher. So the must apply if I want to stay sober. So basis of life. And then book gets a little fighty. It's like, or else, M dash, or else. It's like, oh, girl, you getting punchy. Like, oh, or else. I'm called out and threatened in one page. But that's the reality. If I do not find this spiritual awakening, I will relapse. My step one proposition is that I will relapse. And so I've got to find the solution. And it says, perhaps it's going to be that way with you, but cheer up. It's like, girl, you just threatened me. Cheer up. And that's how I know. That's how I know the book is meeting us where we're at. Because it's like, cheer up. It'll be okay. I hear you. Like, I'm with you. I'm with you with this. But cheer up. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. But cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Again, half, they're repeating that same idea. Half of us thought we were atheist or agnostic. Half of us didn't think we could get the spiritual angle. And that's that first 100 members who we might expect to be the most religious, pious, spiritual beings. And I will point out, if I think they're my homies, they got to be a little down to earth. And actually, that's part of why I love the histories, because you get to see how flawed some of these guys are and how human they are, which makes them relatable. So our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. So don't, like, it's saying, don't stress, homie. That's what disconcerted means. See, Rob's got the definition in the chat, and it says disconcerted. And then Rob said it absolutely means don't be stressed, homie. That's what Rob wrote. You don't need to check. You don't need to fact check the chat on that. But like our experience, and this is something that's important, especially as we talk about this program of action and to talk about step 2. Experience trumps opinion. Experience outweighs opinion. I might have opinions on God or theories on God or opinions on the steps or theories about the steps, but experience is what carries weight. So I might have the opinion that I can't have a relationship with power, or I can't believe in power, or I can't believe in God. But our experience says the hoop that you have to jump through is far wider than you could imagine. And it says, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. And it's this idea that I cannot stay sober on an idea. I cannot stay sober on a belief. I cannot stay sober. And like, what is a mere code of morals or a better philosophy on life? Well, I'm going to use some contemporary examples of which I have no opinion on. Have you guys ever heard of the let them theory? It's kind of popular now. Let them. If they want to talk bad about you, let them. That's a better philosophy of life. And have you guys ever heard of the 4 agreements? And I always forget most of them. There's only 4 and I struggle. It's wild that I've thrived in a 12-step fellowship because that's 3 times as many things to do. But it's like one of them is don't ever take anything personally. Anyone thrive at that? Is she talking about me when she said that? Be impeccable with your word. Open, honest, transparent communication. Can't remember the rest. Sometimes I'm 3 out of 4. I'm often 2 out of 4 with remembering them. But those are examples of philosophies. And I want to point something out. They're not bad. They're good. Those are good things with no opinion on them. But do you know what I mean? If you're like, yeah, I love that, let them. Or I love the 4 agreements. Amazing. But if you're somebody like me, I can't let them. I can't let them. I got to go and I got to just get my fingers in that. And I got to listen, I got to be right. And I got to be right with an audience. Y'all need to agree with me, and like not take things personally. Impeccable with my word. Impeccable. You mean, like say the thing, like, hey, when you do that thing that bothers me, impeccable. I can't do that. I don't have the power. And it says we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. So it's not that I wasn't even trying at those things. And it says we could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Now, I got this from Bill Swan, and when he gives me things, he wants credit. So I'm giving you credit, Bill. Love you. This is from Bill. The needed power wasn't there. There is no power in an idea. There is no power in an ideal. There is no power. And what is my dilemma? Lack of power. And that's the idea that I can have a conception of God at step 2, but again, my conception is not going to keep me sober. And I've been on a bit of an Oxford group kick since Drew came here, because I clearly have some attention that is quite deficit and at times perhaps a bit hyperactive and is definitely disordered, undiagnosed. And so Drew shows up and he does a phenomenal workshop on the Oxford group, and he's mentioning these books, and so I'm going and I'm listening to all these. And there's this book called The Guidance of God, and on it, on page 7, the author writes, beliefs without power are merely ideals. So a belief without power is an ideal, and I can't live up to it. And what I need is not belief in a power or belief in the steps or the belief in the 4 agreements or the belief in, whatever's your jam. I need that belief with power. Often Terry talks about an acquisition of power, and I talk a lot about a relationship with power. I need power. The power was not there. There's no power in an ideal, so I need to tap into that power. It says our human resources, as marshaled by the will, so as led by my willpower, my human resources were not sufficient. They failed utterly. And again, I want to point something out. There is nothing wrong with any of the things that I mentioned. They are good. They are wonderful. They are amazing. But I can't be that person. And I want to be that person. I can't live up to it. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. It's almost as though that was a natural segue. You want to know? It was not. It was not. It was not a natural segue at all. So lack of power, that was our dilemma. So my problem is I do not have the power. I don't have the power to stay sober. I don't have the power to be the person that I want to be. I don't have the power to live happy, joyous, and free. I do not have that power. So it says we had to find a power by which we could live. Not a power that is an idea, a power that is living, that is working through me. That's what I need. And it had to be, and I'm going to point out this is in italics. So it's important. It's not so important that they paid extra money for it. We did a lot of research in finding out that wasn't true. Oh, we're on page 45. But also how you pronounced it was like page, please. Page, which I'm always here for that too. Yeah, that's good stuff. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, Paige, please get to the point. I'm trying. So capital P power, italics, it's important. We didn't pay extra for that. That would have stopped kind of coming up to the 1930s. But that myth goes on because we want to emphasize if it's in italics, it is important. So capital P power, and I want to always emphasize when these words are capitalized, what are we talking about? We are talking about, and I know this is Kathy's absolute favorite word, synonyms. We are talking about synonyms, which is always better when pronounced cinnamons, because that just sounds tasty and delightful. But a synonym is a word that means the same thing as another word. And so if you do not like the word God, that word God makes you bristle with antagonism. It makes you feel closed off. You're not open. These are words that you get to use instead of that word. Because that's a starting place. And that's more than a place to start. And yes, Synonyms Anonymous, which goes along well with on Friday's Tangents Anonymous. Yeah, absolutely. And then the people a couple of years ago that were doing the cinnamon challenge, Don't do that. That's not a safe thing to do. I just thought I'd throw a disclaimer. That's synonym or nope. Now I can't say cinnamon. Cinnamon Anonymous. Oh goodness. I know. I know. Uh, so what we're talking about, those words are pointing to God. Those words are pointing to power. And it is a beautiful thing, that idea that God, the word, is just a title. It's just a title. Because if you look at the things that you have put as God in your life, now not you guys, but not you guys are delightful. But I have had some gods in my life. I'll tell you, alcohol was a god in my life. Crack cocaine was a god in my life. There were pills I was popping, they were a god in my life. You know, God in my life, his attention. I know nobody can relate to that. That idea that I have had power prestige. I haven't ever had power or prestige, let's be honest. But attention, affection, validation, worth, approval, man, those are gods in my life. I have had gods in my life. It is the title. And what I need is to build a relationship with that which is beyond the title. Beyond the title. So it had to be a capital P, power greater than ourselves. And that says obviously, which I don't know when you got here, but when I got here, nothing was obvious. But yeah, it makes sense. It obviously had to be a power greater than ourselves. But where and how were we to find this capital P power? And what I will say is, I think that then points to, at a starting point, let's go a little deeper than something like a doorknob. Let's go a little deeper than something like a light bulb. Because I don't know about you, and some of you have probably done some drugs out of some light bulbs. And yeah, some of you have not, and you're distinguished people. But little crackhead over here. The light bulb goes out. You get a locksmith in, the doorknob gets changed. Can I go a little bit deeper with, could there be something more than that? And but where and how were we to find this capital P power? Because I need to build a relationship with power. And it says, well, that's exactly what this book is about. So the whole point of this book is this, is its main object. So the main purpose is to enable you to find a capital P power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Solve. That's what's on offer. Solve. Recovered. That does not mean cured, but it means solved. And the whole point of this whole book is to help me to build a relationship with this power. And if you guys are kind of like, girl, she's talking about relationship a whole lot, maybe that has a religious connotation because maybe you have religious trauma. I don't mean it in that way. The way in which I mean it, and why I'm so big on relationship. Now, bear with me with this. Man, we are not getting far in this reading. And I'm going on a Tinder rant. So just bear with me with my Tinder tangent. I know that you lovely, respectable alcoholics and drug addicts and compulsive folks would never spend any time on Tinder. There is the joke, like, how do you know the alcoholic or the drug addict is on their second date? They got their two garbage bags full of crap from rehab, and they're in the driveway. That's how you know we're on the second date. Ta-da! So we don't typically date. But you see, the second step is a lot like being on Tinder. Please bear with me. So if you're like, girl, you talk about relationship with God is bringing up some religious trauma, I am subverting that right now. But it's a little like being on Tinder. And in the sense that, like, and I don't know which way you're supposed to swipe for yes or no, but all we're trying to do at step 2 is just believe that we're not being catfished. Do you know what I'm saying? All I gotta believe is that there could be a power. Does Tinder still have super likes? I don't even gotta super like this power. Right is yes and left is no. I barely got to swipe right on this thing. I just got to not swipe left. I got to just barely swipe right. It could be an accidental swipe right on this power. That's all I got to do as a starting place. Now, part of why I use this metaphor, and some of you are like, girl, this is weirder than I anticipated. Me too. But part of why I use this metaphor is if you've ever been dating and, like a first date, Now, again, I'm talking about people who don't historically have those. We have a second date roommate. But if that first date, it's like a little awkward and uncomfortable. And I feel nervous. And it's a little like when we first start taking spiritual action. And doesn't it often feel like I'm talking to a wall? And I feel uncomfortable praying. I feel uncomfortable meditating. I feel uncomfortable with spirituality. And that's where we start. But it is not with time. Because if you go on one first date with somebody and go on a second date with them like a year later, you're not going to feel more connected. It is with consistency that a relationship is built. Consistency with prayer, consistency with meditation, consistency with the actions of these 12 steps that build a relationship. Now, those of you who are in relationships or married, you guys might be aware of this thing that if you don't talk to your spouse for a week, there's we're going to be in some trouble. And this is hopefully not news for anyone. If you don't listen to your spouse for like a week, you're not going to feel very connected. And if and I know that you guys would never have petty fights in your relationship, and always be impeccable with your word and communicate when you're annoyed about your partner leaving socks places. And then the toilet seat in the inappropriate position, you guys would always communicate about that. But somebody like me, I avoid that sort of communication. And when there's that unspoken thing, that barrier between you don't feel connected. And so what the purpose of the 12 steps is to clear away that stuff. And I build this relationship with this power. For those of you that are married, fingers crossed, knock on wood, hopefully your experience is that is the person that you would go to when you need comfort, the person that you want to spend time with, that person that, when something exciting happens at work, you just want to share it with them. You won't believe what Janet in accounting did. You just want to share it because they've become that source of comfort. And it is just like that in the spiritual journey. So it is okay. If right now it feels awkward, right now it feels uncomfortable, man, all I need you to do is swipe right. That's it. That's it. And it is about that much spiritual effort. We don't even got to super like it. So, and it says, so that means that we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Again, saying, here's what we're going to talk about, and here's where we know you're going to struggle. And it says, many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. Yes, that's me. Yes, I drink like that. Yes, I know what it is like to relapse. And yeah, I'm not alone, like that feeling of not alone. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters. Oh no, this is a God deal. I saw that word on the Zoom screen, or I saw that word on the scroll, like, ugh, right? Especially, but his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention the subject of God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he neatly evaded or entirely ignored. That like, ooh, I don't gotta do nothing with that. And it's like, oh no, it's squaring me in the face. And so this is the book meeting us where we're at. And we're going to discuss in this next paragraph genuine barriers that we bring that feel, and they are real, and they feel like barriers to belief in this power. It says, we know how he feels because we have all been there. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. So we have shown up with doubt and prejudice. That word prejudice is to prejudge an experience I've not had. To have judgment about something, about an experience I have not yet had. I know that the steps couldn't work for me. Well, have you done them? No, but I know they could not work. That is the most succinct example. I was going to make a metaphor about Ontario and be like, let me tell you all about Ontario. Have you been there? Well, now I have quite a bit. Ontario's so next to me. Or Florida. I could tell you all my opinions about Florida. Have you been to Florida? No, but it's like -40 with the wind chill. So I am taking invitations, you guys. Yeah. Ooh, it's chilly. Um, so it says that we have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. So we have been there with doubt and prejudging experiences we've not yet had. It says some of us have been violently anti-religious, so against organized religion. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. So maybe that is a punishing God that pushed on us in childhood that led us to have some religious trauma. Maybe it was the Santa Claus God. You know, this God that's sitting on white bearded guy sitting in the sky, judging me, whether I'm good or whether I'm bad. If I'm good, I get good. If I'm bad, I get coal, like punished, like that sort of idea of God. And it says perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. Can't believe in a Santa Claus. It says, with that rejection, we imagined that we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power, capital P power, beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. Now, I got here young, and despite the fact I have never been cool in my entire life, I somehow hang out in church basements with you lovely folks, with the everyone's putting their temperature in, with the coffee creamer that won't stir in no matter how hard you try. And all of a sudden, I want to be cool. And I want to be cool. Never in my life have I ever been cool. But I show up here and I gotta be cool. And God, that's not cool, right? Oh, God, no. And so I'll be honest, I started using higher power because that's what the cool kids were using when I got sober. I think now it's more universe, is more the like hit phrase. I wouldn't know because, again, never been cool. Never been cool. So cannot relate. But I was stuck with that idea of like, okay, so I started with higher power. And I started using the word higher power, well, words, higher power. And here's the thing with higher power. It's 2 words. It's a whole lot of syllables. You're worried I got here young. Don't you worry. I am efficient. My life was burnt to the ground efficiently. I got to a place of hopelessness quite efficiently. And I found that word God, 1 syllable, 3 letters, super efficient. And so I started to use that word simply out of efficiency. And here's my experience. That word began to mean not what I thought that you meant when you used it, right? Because I had prejudice. I made assumptions of what I thought you meant when you used that word, God. But instead, that word began to mean what I had experienced. And this is a program of experience. And so when I talk about God, because I use that word quite a bit, because I don't know if you're aware, I go off on tangents and I need as much time as possible to try to get back on track. So I use that word God. And when I use that word God, what I mean is a conception of a power greater than yourself that you are the most open to, upon which that you get to build a relationship or have an experience with of your own understanding. Also, by the way, I was going to get to this probably next week, but I'm on the tangent train. I got 1 minute left. I know. But the word understanding in my 1930s dictionary, to understand means to know through experience. So I'm not going to understand this power at step 2. I'm going to build an experience with this power through these 12 steps. And that's how it becomes the God of my understanding. So it says, weak, even cowardly. We looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. If there is a God, why is there war? Why is there war in the name of God? Why is there pain? Why is there suffering? Why is there trauma? Why is there all of this horrors happening in the world today? And it says, we looked askance, and that means skeptically, and many individuals who claim to be godly. So people who have done terrible things in the name of religion. But we can also look at people that we judge in the rooms of 12 step. Oh, well, I thought he should be Mr. Spiritual, and there he is doing something unspiritual, right? I know, not you guys. You guys can't relate to that because you wouldn't judge anyone, me. But that judgment, right? And then it says, how could a capital S, capital B, supreme being have anything to do with them? And who could comprehend, who could understand a capital S, capital B, supreme being anyhow? Yet, in other moments, we found ourselves thinking when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. I'm going to point out something. What opens us up? Experience. That starlit night, the awe of the ocean, being out in the mountains, or seeing a recovered alcoholic or a recovered addict, and that light that is on in their eyes. The experience of you guys have been where I've been, done what I've done, and you have something that I do not have. Experience is what opens us up. And we'll talk more about that next week. I'm a minute over, so I'll stop the recording and we can wrap up with the prayer.